Hello, all you cultists out there. Recently, Chaosium released their second edition of their Call of Cthulhu monster manual called Malleus Monstrorum. It's a massive and beautiful publication in 2 volumes covering almost every aspect of monsters and monstrosities in the world of Lovecraftian horror and, of course, the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. I had the opportunity to talk monsters with the legendary Mike Mason from Chaosium. In this monster talk, we were also joined by Gabrielle de Bourg and Jonas Larsson Olanders, who recently worked with Eloso Publishing on the Swedish version of the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. By the way, do you see the Spelkult logo down in the corner? We are a collective of 50 people that are passionate about gaming. So we produce material, content, news articles and stuff just because we love every aspect of gaming. So if you really like this and what we do, please hit the subscribe button with a high five down there in the corner, and we will be really happy and your soul will be saved forever. My name is Nicholas, and let's dive right into the interview. Welcome to this panel discussion with Mike Mason from Chaosium, Gabrielle de Bourg from Eloso, but you are also working as a freelance and
Yes.
independent writer, right?
I am only independent. I am not employed by Eloso, but I've done a lot of freelance work for them.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And also Jonas Larsson Olanders, who recently edited the Swedish Call of Cthulhu book. But we are here to discuss the Malleus Monstrorum, the big, massive book that Chaosium recently released, filled with monsters and deities and gods and everything. Mike, could you please tell us, the Malleus Monstrum, it was released in 2006, but now you have a new edition. Tell us a little bit about this new one.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you say, the original was 2006, which was a single book, black and white interior, that was really the work of Scott David Anilowski, who had gone through many previously published scenarios and campaigns and kind of pulled all the monsters that had appeared in the various kind of Call of Cthulhu books over the years into one kind of collection. There had been some smaller kind of monster collections previously, but this was the first one that really pulled most of the monsters and mythos gods together. And so with Call of Cthulhu 7th edition released some years back now, it's been one of the books we've wanted to focus on and update for the current edition of the game, and to also to republish it with improved artwork and more scope really in terms of what the book was about and what it contained. So I spent around about 12 months or so working and redeveloping all of the monsters and all of the mythos gods for the new edition, which is now a 2-volume slipcase set. One book focuses on the monsters of the mythos, and the second volume focuses on the deities of the mythos. And so we've added lots of artwork, new artwork, mainly created by Loic Musi, who's well known for drawing and illustrating the horrors of the Cthulhu mythos. And what I added in was more detail, more history and information about the various deities and monsters, additional kind of material about how to create your own monsters and also how to use monsters in games and what that means. So there's a lot of additional material in the new edition as opposed to the first edition of the book. It's on one hand, it's a very simple, bestiary of monsters that you can choose to populate your games with, to the other extreme, which is it's a book of lore. It's a book of information that you can use to design scenarios, to craft campaigns, to build inspiration for your own kind of creations around the mythos in the Call of Cthulhu game.
Is there also, could you say that this book is aimed also towards new GMs for there is a lot of educational stuff. For structuring. Create new monsters also, or how?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think. To be honest, it's a useful book for any gamer and any keeper. But there's a lot of advice in terms of how to use monsters, the kind of thought processes you need to go through if you are wanting to design your own monsters for the game. About scaling, about how many attacks should a monster have. What will a monster do? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of additional advice which is useful for anyone, running the game, to be honest, but particularly would be helpful for novice keepers in that way. There's clear guidance really on how to describe the monsters, how to use them, and what the monsters' motivations are, or what they could be. Yeah. In your scenarios.
Yeah, I think the book looks like a monster itself with its 2 volumes. It must be really heavy. And but I don't
think it's quite as it's not quite as big as the rule book and investigator handbook slipcase, but I think it will sit nicely at either end of the bookshelf with those. So,
Gabrielle, you're author of many published Call of Cthulhu scenarios and adventures, and so what's your relations to the Call of Cthulhu Mythos monsters, and how do you use them while writing and GMing?
So for me, when it comes to Call of Cthulhu monsters, my main approach is to sort of the first thing I decide is scale. Like as Mike mentioned, scale. If it's like, are we going to deal with the great old one? The scale has to be very big, and then the story also needs to be big. Like if it's going to be like, you don't want to run a one shot where like if you fail, Azathoth awakens and the whole world collapses. The other thing also about scale is like threat level of the scale. Like it's easy to sort of forget that, just like having a buyer key flying around, it's not really a strong enemy, but it is an enemy that can, like, you can do a lot of things with it and cause other problems. Like this was something that I picked up a lot when I was playing a lot of Delta Green, when I realized like sometimes it's not the threat of the monster killing you, it's more what harm can the monster do to society. But the other thing is also to avoid the sort of cliche of people knowing exactly what the monsters are and what they're going to do. And that's why I sort of decide, okay, should it be more a creature feature, or should we sort of keep them far away in the background? Because if you're doing a creature feature, you kind of need to be sort of nice-ish to let players know what kind of monster they're dealing with, because it's not really fun to play, like that's always, I think, a challenge when adapting Lovecraftian stories to the role-playing game. It's, if you read something like The Whisper in Darkness, which is brilliant, but, if you were to basically run that as a Call of Cthulhu scenario, it wouldn't work with anyone who has any idea what Amigo is. Like, if you played Call of Cthulhu, if you read the story, like the twist would be, oh, it was Amigo all along, and everybody would be like, yeah, of course, we saw that a mile away. There's no tension here. So then the risk of using something that's very familiar is then you'll sort of figure it out easily. And that's why I sort of occasionally like to sort of tweak monsters, or occasionally like create my own one. Like the one in this one here, say En Seance in Stockholm, or a Seance in Stockholm, we did sort of semi-create a new monster, or like a spawn of a monster. And that was a good thing, because then it was familiar in one way, but it was also completely alien. You wouldn't know what it was going to do. And once you figured out what it was, you knew like, oh my God, it's going to be this thing. We're going to have to face that, and that is not going to be fun at all.
Yeah.
No. But
yeah.
And then of course motivation. Like the one thing I always say about monsters when it comes to log prep is I don't want to fall into the trap of the monsters are evil, because that applies a sort of human black and white morality, and that removes the alien aspects of them. I really like to sort of keep them more around at times, especially if you have a lot of humans in them, to keep them more as a wild card. Like these monsters are here and they have their own motivation, but that is maybe not something that is evil per se. Like that was something I actually did here. Like it was a monster, it is a servitor monster, and the motivation of that monster is I need a new master. Like that is its motivation. And what it does makes sense within that motivation. It's not, and it's actually very strictly shown to be like not evil, just following its instincts.
Yeah, true. Jonas, how did you work with the Lovecraftian mythos and the beasts and monsters in the Swedish edition of Call of Cthulhu? Because it's an adaptation, right? It's you have to bake it in some way, not maybe just copy paste him, but think about him an extra. How do you do when you work with them in Swedish culture? Can they stand and resist the Swedish culture? Now I can't hear you. Sorry. No, I don't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I changed the microphone. It wasn't really that hard to adapt them into the Swedish settings. National borders are like a petty human things that most aliens don't care about. They're not going to say, oh, Scandinavia, we don't want to go there, we go to France instead. They don't care. If we take Mygo, for example, they are a mining species, and we have a lot of mines in the Scandinavia, old mines. Of course they're going to come here because of that. The hardest part with monsters is actually how you conjugate them, because most of the monsters don't really sound good when you try to use them in plural form or the decided form in Swedish. That was the hardest challenge, actually.
Did you, when you created your scenarios for this latest edition, did you customize the monsters and adapt them more, or how did you work with them?
I used the monsters as written. Because when I'm not the editor, I'm also a librarian, so I like to always try to trick people into reading. So I don't try to have some weird kind of new Mygo, and instead, when I play my Mygo, one is one of my favorite monsters from the Mythos. When I have a Mygo adventure, I mostly play with people that are newer to the Mythos and haven't played Call of Cthulhu a lot. That's a part of my work, to play and introduce the game to a lot of people. So when I have a Mygos or Callers Out of Space, I always, they never heard of it, so I don't need to twist it around and this, what's this kind of weird insect alien? It's awesome. And then I can, there's actually a short story you can read about it. It's really good. So I will have that back in my mind, because it is a literary treasure to have the connection to Lovecraft work. And I think it's really fun to introduce people to that.
Great. Mike, and all of you, actually, what would you say is the difference between the Cthulhu Mythos monsters and the general monsters, we're speaking Dungeons and Dragons monsters? Can you explain what's the signature difference there?
I think at a base level, monsters in fantasy RPGs are there to be killed and plundered. Some of them are quite intelligent, but they tend to exist to be something to be overcome in the game, and that is their point. That is their purpose, is to be an obstacle for the player characters to move past, and that is it. They have no other agenda, and and that is very similar to a lot of monster movies. The monster exists to normally, attack and eat people or kill people. That is its purpose. That is its purpose in life. It does nothing else. Occasionally, there are some films where it does something different, but Alien is the classic. What does the monster do? It exists to kill things and make more monsters, just like Jaws. It exists to kill people and make more Jaws. Whereas in the Cthulhu mythos, the monsters have an agenda. Often, it's not one agenda, but they have an agenda. As Jonas has just said, the Migo are known for mining, to getting resources for some reason. We don't know what resources they want, but we know that they go after them. So they have an agenda. So the Migo aren't waiting in a cavern for the investigators to turn up and kill them. The Migo, to the investigators, are a nuisance to the Migo at most, and probably would be easier for the Migo to try and control the humans, so they go away and stop other humans coming, rather than killing the humans, which may bring more humans to the tunnels they want to keep secret. So there's an agenda there, and the same, for many other mythos entities. The big thing is we have no clear agenda of what that agenda is. We as a keeper decide if we want to reveal that agenda or not, or keep it mysterious. But the monsters continue to act. They will continue to work their agenda while the investigators are doing their thing. Sometimes they will come together, and that may be a fight, that may be something else, and some sort of outcome happens. But the monsters aren't sitting around a table waiting for investigators to turn up. They are doing something. They have their own mission, and the investigators are often just a nuisance to get in the way of that mission. So I think that's fundamentally one of the big differences, I think.
Gabrielle, do you have a take on?
No, I definitely agree with Mike, but I think it's other fun comparison is to compare the monsters of the Call of Cthulhu games to other horror role-playing games. So I think the most fun to compare to is the fairly recent horror role-playing game Väsen from or Free League Publishing. They also work with, where all of the monsters are based on Nordic folklore, and there's quite a few folklore-inspired horror role-playing games around, at least here in Sweden, where it's like classic folklore, it's more classic ghost tales. And what I think is interesting between those types of monsters and the Call of Cthulhu monsters is that folkloric monsters are very sort of human. They're either like in Väsen and old classic folkloric creatures are based around human interactions. They often represent how do we take care of nature, and they're always about teaching us lesson, and they're very thematic. If you take a ghost story, all ghost stories are about tragedy. They're about these big, deep, personal human themes. What I enjoy so much about the Call of Cthulhu monsters is that they're alien. They're completely and utterly alien. They have no general idea of what we are, of what we do, and we are but ants to them. That's sort of the thing. And some of them are really fun to work with. I wrote about a Colorado space once, and it's terrific. It's just describing it's a light phenomena that just kills people, and you are so utterly left out when it comes to a lot of the creatures in the Call of Cthulhu universe. Just like Mike say, they aren't adversaries to the bash and kill in classic fantasy role-playing games, but similar to more investigative folkloric creatures, they aren't adversaries to sort of outsmart or overcome, or as in most of them, to sort of finish their undue business, which is a classic theme. They are above all of that, and they are out of that, and the best thing we can do is either delay what they're doing or just find out what they're doing, but it might not be a nice thing to find out what they're doing because it's going to cost us all our sanity and the law. when it all comes around to it. And that's sort of the thing, is they're huge on a philosophical level, and the best thing we could do is to just not show up, yet we do.
Jonas, do you have any, I was thinking, do you have any tips for a GM, a game master that usually plays Dungeons and Dragons and those games, that is interested in trying Call of Cthulhu? How should they approach the monster and the mythos? Because that's quite different from approaching monsters in Dungeons and Dragons.
My practical tip would actually to start some adventures without any monsters and just use human cultists, because you have something close to that in Dungeons and Dragons. They have cultists and mad priests and people in bathrobes as well. And they are just talking about monsters and slowly introducing them, because the combat is so different, the theme is so different, the objective is so different. Dungeons and Dragons is a power fantasy that will help you forget how boring your normal life is, because you feel like a muscular macho man that can beat up dragons and take their money. But Call of Cthulhu is instead about feeling insignificant and fearful, but in a safe context, because it's fun to feel those things. So if you only have played Dungeons and Dragons, start only with cultists, introduce the weird slimy things a little later. That's a good tip for most Call of Cthulhu game masters, actually.
Yeah, Mike, you have any aces in your sleeve?
It's just a case of being careful in your presentation of monsters. We rely, as games masters, we rely on sight all the time. The monster looks like this, and if you do that, you don't. You're forgetting all the other senses we have: the sound, the smell, the taste, the touch of the air, what the slime trail feels like. All these things, help us to visualize and build a picture of the monster beyond the visual. But I think what's key, particularly in Call of Cthulhu, is don't describe it all. Leave room, because at the end of the day, very difficult in any role-playing game, let alone Call of Cthulhu, to scare the players, actually scare the players. It's a really, you can't, it's so hard to do, because we're sitting, online or around a table, and we all know each other, and we know we're playing a game. And so whatever I, as a key person, say, it's really hard for me to sort of say, oh, this monster's scary, you should be scared. Yeah, I can say your character can be scared, but you as a player won't feel scared, really. So what makes people scared? The unknown makes people scared. That, Lovecraft, the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. So if you leave room in your descriptions for a monster for the player to fill in their head, they are far more likely to come up with something more scary in their head than what you can verbally describe. So that's what I mean by trying to leave some room. So, you can say there are, two piercing red eyes in the corner of the room in the darkness of the shadow. You can't see much else, but there's this awful kind of acrid smell coming through, from this thing. You don't know what it is. Now, I've not said what it is at all. I've just given a couple of kind of vague clues, but every player is now filling in their head what it could be. They're building on those details. I could never do. And that monster is now more scary because of, rather than me just saying, in the corner there's a dimensional shambler, which is not scary in any way. And everyone goes, oh, it's a dimensional shambler. So leave room, describe things subtly and lightly, and pull the senses together is my number one tip, really, in that way, to try and leave mystery. It's a mystery game. Make the monsters mysterious in that way, as much as you can.
In my opinion, I am a player of Call of Cthulhu. I never GM'd Call of Cthulhu. I would like someday, but we have such a good GM, so I cannot do it with this group at least. But in our games, the monsters are pretty scarce. I mean, even in the campaigns, it's maybe you meet them. A monster once half a year or something, but there's a build-up, a long build-up. And then you release this massive, really beautiful book with a lot of monsters. Sometimes you just want to, flesh out all the monsters there is because you want to use them. It's such a beautiful book. But that should not be done then.
It comes down to the style of game you want to play.
Yeah.
And that decision can only be made by you and your group of players.
Yeah.
If you want to play a Monster of the Week style of game, then you can do that with Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is very, very flexible in the style of game that you want to play. If you want a monster to only turn up once a year in your game, that's fine as well. But it comes down to the style of game you want to play. And so, and that is a conversation that you should be having with your players, with keeping the players. Obviously, there's some sense of, I'm not going to tell you what the plot is, but getting a sense of what do you enjoy about the games we're playing? Do you enjoy, when you're running away from monsters, or do you enjoy the kind of the investigation and the kind of slow build and the peeling away the onion layers to find the mystery, which are kind of quite different styles of play. But you can do both with Call of Cthulhu. So I think there's the need to kind of understand what your players are looking for from their enjoyment of role playing. And the thing is, again, the beauty of Call of Cthulhu, you can have both happening. You can have extended sequences with just one monster over a number of weeks or months. That is one scenario. Or you can play quick fire one shots where it's like you're playing a horror movie every night, a different horror movie. And in that horror movie, there may be cultists, there may be monsters, there may be, who knows, whatever. But you can do all these things. But I don't think there's a one answer. I think the answer is what you and your group want to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that the book is so, you really want to use it. But we are more a group of detective style playing, and we have 40 hours of not seeing the sight of a monster yet in our campaign. But if I was going to introduce it to some Dungeons and Dragons players, which are a huge mass of people, there could be some putting in some monsters because that was they're used to.
The other thing to factor into this is, yes, you have a big book of monsters with lots of cool information. You don't actually have to ever meet the monster to find that information. The information I present in the books is designed to be pulled out and put in tomes and things, or to come out of the mouths of cultists. So if you want to kind of use, a plethora of monsters without actually putting them in the game, you can use this all as investigative information. You can learn about these monsters before you meet them, or learn about monsters and hope that you never meet them because they sound so awful. And, you see these kind of foreshadowing things in through the investigation.
Yeah. Gabrielle, I have to ask you, to create atmosphere when you're game mastering.
Yeah.
Give me some good tips.
To start with, if we're talking about monsters, the first thing is the best thing to make the monsters scary is make them do things. And this is in general a thing, but it's this is a thing from movie making where they say action creates character. I'm not going to say this monster is slimy and scary. It's not scary. If you come into the room and then you see the man whose face has now been peeled off by what can only be described by the bulbing acid of what is before your eyes, that is suddenly scary, because then you know the threat this thing poses. And it can be you can actually see it before your eyes. I use that quite a bit there, but it's also very effective to do the like that is something that's done in At the Mountains of Madness, is sort of seeing the aftermath of like when they find the abandoned elder thing, the abandoned camp where an elder thing woke up, and you sort of come in and you see the people who have died. That is a great way to sort of read into the threat posed by a monster. Like that's and always build up. Like Mike mentioned, there's lots of great info in the book to use in tomes or in the Mouth of Cultists. There's so much lore that, like, if you do a whole lot of build up for your monster during a scenario, so by the time they actually meet it, you don't really have to do any work at all, because the players are terrified because you've been telling them and showing them how scary this thing is when they're gonna meet it. And when they meet it, they hate that they have to meet it. So that's one of the things. But if we're talking like atmosphere in general, the first thing I say is dynamics. Like allow people to be scared. A mistake a lot of people or a lot of GMs do is trying to sort of further the action all the time. Like I don't really like the whole "this thing is happening, what do you do?" question, because it always implies action, that your playing needs to do actions. And when it comes to horror, it's about emotions. Like, people need to be scared. If you don't actually present that you need to do things straight away, the first thing most people are going to do is allow themselves to tell how they react. Or if you do, ask them, how do you react? Not what do you do? Because if you say that, most of them are going to say, I'm terrified. I scream, I shout, I try and run out of the room. That's a great thing, because then they get to play on the horror. That's the thing, you got to play on the horror and like give them room to be scared. And by that also, you need to give them room to breaks, to allow and act out on that scare. Like, if you're throwing monsters and actions on them all the time, they're gonna get numb to it. Like, and of course, like, understand when I say this, but the great thing about die rolls is die rolls are great to create tension, because there's tension up in the sky if you do it, if you're gonna make it or not. But if you use too many die rolls, it's just role-playing bingo. People are just shouting numbers, and numbers aren't scary, except in the Delta Green scenario, the last equation. But other than that, numbers aren't really scary. And that's sort of the thing. And also, allow people to joke. Like something I see so many people say is, like, we shouldn't be laughing around because we're playing horror. And I say, no. Look at Alien and Jaws, like Mike mentioned. Some of the best scares in those movies happen at scenes of laughter. Like, there's a good reason the chest burster plops out of John Hurt when they're all laughing around the dinner table, because we've let our guard down. Or when the first time we probably see the shark in Jaws is after a funny line, which is, slow ahead, I can slow ahead, you come down and chum some of this shit. And then the shark flops up out of the water. And that's the thing, like, give the players some opportunity to laugh and have fun and feel safe. Great. Because when they feel safe, they know the contrast to feeling scared. And then you scare them.
Yeah.
That's always a great opportunity. That's and great. Also remember, most people laugh when they're scared.
Yeah.
Like, if they're joking around, they're probably so scared they need to joke around to handle it emotionally. And that's usually good. That means you're doing your job well.
That is pretty good described. There's an entire section of how to use the scare and the monster stuff in Malleus Monstrorum, right? In the first part, there is a section that describes how to use tension and how to use that's very, very good. Another question, Mike, and all of you, one at a time. What is your favorite best monster from the Cthulhu Mythos that you may have used or may have experienced as a player? And any anecdote there? Mike, you begin.
It changes all the time, you know. I really like the Migo. I like the idea of these creatures that are fungus that can, and you know, fungus can grow in many different ways. So I like the idea that Migo can all look really quite different, or act differently and do different things because, you know, they are this kind of ever-living kind of fungus kind of thing. But I'm a big fan of Shoggoths and Shoggoth Lords. I like Shoggoth Lords because they can go around the world looking like us. And just when you're, you know, telling a joke over the table is when, you know, the Shoggoth looks at you and its, you know, face melts away and there's this horror beneath it trying to, you know, eat you. And I like, you know, I like the enemy within, the hidden enemy kind of thing. I think there's a lot of, you know, a lot of fear and tension comes from that, you know, you know, it's a little bit like The Thing, you know, it's among us, we don't know who it is, but whatever it is, it's not good. So I think for me, Shoggoth Lords are really cool in that way.
Yeah, Jonas.
Well, we have already mentioned Mygo a lot, and that's one of my favorite. If I can't choose Mygo, I have to choose the Hounds of Tindalos, because I really like the scientific feel of Lovecraft. This isn't really magical horror, or we only use words like spells and rituals because humans are so dumb, so we can't really understand what the monsters are. That's why we use magic lingo. And I really like the Hounds of Tindalos because I never even describe them as hounds or predators or animals. I try to describe them as antibodies. There are the universal antibodies in the time stream, and humans are the disease, something bad that should be removed. I like that angle on them.
Gabrielle.
I also want to just give a quick shout out to the Migo, because The Whispering Dart is my favorite Lovecraft story. What's really fun about them is their like high level of human interaction. You can do really fun with things with them. But what I also like about them, and are the ones that are going to get shout out, are the Elder Things. And because both the Migo and the Elder Things are great wildcard monsters. They don't have to be evil, and they can have they're very fun because they're incredibly alien and they're weird. Like one of them are fungi, the other ones are starfish-shaped barrel cones. Yet they have a very odd sense of humanity to them, and they're not going to go around like just gibbering and kill you. They have motivations, and they can help the players, or they can interact with the humans. Like they don't have to attack you on sight, which is really fun to use because it's also a really fun way to subvert them. I did a huge scenario where you can meet Elder Things when they're specifically written like they have no allegiance. They will help the players if the players appear friendly. And they might even save the players by the end. But it should never be the feeling of like the Elder Things are the good guys that save the day. They're just sort of getting you out of the situation. But other than that, I'm also like, I love the Shoggoths, like mentioned, but I'm also a huge fan of the Color Out of Space. And because both the Shoggoths and the Color Out of Space are a great start for body horror. And I love body horror. And same thing, of course, with the deep ones. But I think especially like Shoggoths and the Color Out of Space, they really invite you to do these like sort of horrible, scary death scenes. Like just telling how a person dies and having to watch with your own eyes from a Color Out of Space. I've done it with people, and it is just terrifying because they sort of essentially disintegrate and die in front of your eyes, and you cannot really see why. And also because they have like other sensations, like Mike mentioned, like smells and the like. And if I have to give a shout out from the Call of Cthulhu game in particular, I love the Deadlight in the scenario Deadlight, which is very similar to Color Out of Space, but that thing is just terrifyingly awesome.
Yeah.
And alien.
I asked my friend and GM the other day, Rasmus. He told me that the color was his, from the Color Out of Space, is his absolute favorite. But it sounds like Migo had a landslide victory here in this group, at least. Mike, there are 2 volumes in this book, in the Malleus Monstrorum. The one is with creatures and the other one with gods. How do you distinguish them? I mean, with the stats and so on? How do you make them apart?
It's a really good question that no one's ever asked before. The difference is often scale. Monsters of the mythos, are in some sense adjustable on a human scale. They're either smaller than humans, around about the human size, or they're bigger than humans. But they, I guess, in one sense, they are physically manifest. They are, they are independent beings in the sense that they do their thing. Deities of the mythos are on a much larger scale. They tend to be this kind of what's the word for it? They exist beyond the physical representation. There's a ghoul. A ghoul is like a human. There's just one of us, and we can be killed, and then we exist no more. The mythos entities don't follow the same laws of nature or dimensions that we understand. So we can think of them as one entity, but they may actually be multiple entities for all we know. They may exist in multiple dimensions, and we only see the dimensions that we can perceive. They cannot die in the sense that we understand as death. So the scale and dynamics are slightly different, but the caveat always is the mythos there is no canon in the mythos. We present everything under what we think is a usable way of working with these monsters and gods. But in the Malleus Monstrorum, I think I already say, it's up to you how you want to change it. If you want to make ghouls godlike beings in your mythos, that's cool. But it is for you to play with. Ultimately, the mythos is unknowable, so we don't know. There are no rules, so you can portray it as you wish in that way.
Yeah, Jonas, do you use any? Do you distinguish gods and creatures when writing your scenarios?
I haven't actually gotten to gods yet. I've only written scenarios using the normal monsters. I'm really looking forward to write something with Ram Togoth, or however it's pronounced. That's one of my favorite gods, or rather he's a great old one if I don't remember incorrectly. So I haven't actually tried to tackle that yet. It's like trying to make a movie an independent movie then, but I'm making an independent movie, black and white, but I'm going to pay $5 million for a great Hollywood star. It's if you bring in one of the deities, it has to be about them. If you don't only use their name or something.
It's true. Gabrielle, you.
I mean, my easiest distinction is a creature can, in some way or form, be stopped. Of course, scale, but then we might need to scale a lot to say cannot be stopped. Deity can, at best, possibly be survived, or maybe delayed if it's some sort of awakening, or not summoned. They cannot be defeated. Like that's very much sort of the easy way for me to think of a distinction. And when I've used deities in a scenario like I wrote one called Den Gula Filmen, the yellow film, which you can guess what that's all about. Then it was very much sort of this person is going to figure, but the Enhastor in this case is going to figure, but you're not going to stop him. The best thing you can do is sort of not be taken over by him, essentially, and hope that you sort of return somewhat normal. But the idea that you would in any way defeat him is ludicrous. And that's really how it's presented.
Great.
I tend to think about, I think what Gabrielle said is really cool. I tend to think of it like Pandora's box. The mythos entities live inside Pandora's box. And once you open it, all you can do is hope to close it again before too much of it gets out. But even a little bit, even opening a crack and looking in, changes you. It has an effect on you. That kind of sense of this everlasting otherness that is transformative in a bad way, probably, to humanity in that sense.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we are approaching time here, and I would like to ask a last question, and also go all of you around. What does the future look like for Call of Cthulhu from now on, and what are you working on at the moment that can be mentioned? Mike, you again?
I would say the future looks cosmic, and what I'm working on is okay. So what am I working on? Okay, so I'm currently working on a campaign called The Time to Harvest, which was originally released through Chaosium's organized play program a few years ago. We've redeveloped it and taken in a lot of the feedback from the various keepers who ran the organized play campaign. And we're putting that in a book form with artwork and so forth. And so I'm currently finishing that off. Myself and Lynn Hardy have been working on that. And I'm also about to start working on a redevelopment of the Miskatonic kind of Valley series. So Arkham and Dunwich and Kingsport and Innsmouth. Those books are on my kind of table now to start redeveloping.
Oh, exciting.
I've got one other book that's nearing completion, which is called The Cults of Cthulhu, which is all about the Cthulhu cult. It comes with scenarios and information about the different cults of Cthulhu, how to create your own cult, how to, not in real life, only in the game.
Oh, that sounds like my cup of tea.
And information on the hidden unseen masters of the Cthulhu cult, all that kind of stuff. That should be coming out next year. And the last thing I can say is I'm also working on some secret things, because in 2021, around Halloween, is the 40th anniversary of Call of Cthulhu. So I'm currently working on some top secret things for the anniversary period later next year.
Oh, sounds like I have to give my wallet a big massage here. Gabrielle, please tell us, what are you doing?
Like we recently released a Swedish edition for Call of Cthulhu. I helped write one of the campaigns, and Seance in Stockholm. I also wrote Den Gula Filmen, the yellow film, together with Mikael Petersen and Nina Jonsson, the creators of Cult, which was like a one-shot scenario for it. And I'm right now working on something English-speaking Call of Cthulhu for another publisher, so not Eloso and Chaosium. And you'll sort of have to look out what that is. And other than that, I recently worked for Vaesen, that was recently released. And I have some other things up my slate that haven't really been announced. And another one of them English-speaking. So a bit of it Swedish, a bit of it English. And of course, I'm writing a bit for Kock, for Eloso, which is also in Swedish. And I'm hoping to do, we're working on an idea, Mika and Gunilla, for something for the Swedish Call of Cthulhu, but that is still very much at that state. So, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention that for Jonas, but if so, he'll have to stop.
Yeah. All right, Jonas. What are you up to?
I'm actually right now working on an adaptation on an American CC adventure that's going to be adapted to the Swedish one. It's written by a guy named, let me check my note, Mike Mason or something. You probably heard of him. It's The Getting Away From It All. We unlocked that as a reward on the Swedish the Kickstart for Swedish Call of Cthulhu, and that's what I'm sitting with right now. And I was really glad because they are actually Viking graves in it. So I felt a cultural connection to it when I read it. Okay, only one Viking grave, or rather a Viking meeting place. But I believe Vikings leave dead Vikings everywhere, so there are probably some buried Vikings in the adventure.
That sounds very interesting. Well, do you have anything else that I haven't asked you that you feel like you want to answer?
No.
No.
I'm tired. No.
That's good, because even me can forget questions sometimes. So it's better to ask the participants if there is something I missed. Well, okay, let's wrap up this panel. And thank you very much for participating. And I'm really looking forward to what you are producing and printing and releasing in the near future here. And thank you to all you viewers who checked this panel out about monsters and other things. And just don't forget to like and subscribe on the bottom below. And may the Mythos gods be with you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.